this had the benefit of quite some discussion. I recall our colleague Senator Longmore certainly giving strong support to this. And I do believe such a duty already, Ms. Roden, doesn't such a duty exist in law already in relation to children? If a medical professional sees signs of abuse in children, then there is a duty to report, yeah? Oh, sorry.
Yes, it exists in the Child Care and Protection Act.
Yes. Okay. Colleagues, agreement?
Yes.
Number 4, establish the duty of all persons other than specified persons to report incidents of suspected elder abuse. So there were presentations where we had submissions on a general duty to report abuse of older persons. Now,
this is just a duty now to report. No other obligation will be laid on these individuals.
Right. And I think that is the case, too, in the Child Care and Protection Act. Yes, Ms. Stewart is nodding her head. Jump in, Tiffany, please, when you need to. So you know, the thing with these provisions, and I don't have any difficulty recommending this personally, but I do say when we have a general duty that every citizen has to report these things, in practice, I don't know how often it happens or how enforceable it is, because all someone has to do is really claim lack of knowledge. I don't know if we've ever really had situations where it has been enforced against anybody. But I think it's a useful provision to have, because certainly it sends a message. It sends a message to our society in terms of the importance of acting and not tolerating incidents of abuse. Go ahead, Senator Morris.
This provision appears, the first time I saw it is in the Child Care and Protection Act.
Yes. And
I think it is utilized there. You know, it might not be, oh, they're asking me to put my face on. All right, give me one. Okay, so I'm on now.
Yes, we're seeing you.
You know, the provision is in the Child Care and Protection Act. As to the consistency of the use, I can't say, but I know that I have heard that being utilized in the media from time to time.
Yes, yes. As have I. I do know though that there are many cases where it is not utilized. People see and don't see. We do have a culture of that in our country sometimes. But I think I'm praying and hoping that we are changing in that way, that we're becoming far less tolerant of criminal acts and injury to our vulnerable persons. So I support it as well.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think just a follow-up. Sorry, Carvalho. I think what is needed is for ongoing public education where these matters are concerned. You know, you have a time signal that can say, do you know that it is an offense for failure to report on abuse of elderly persons or children?
Yes.
And the time by, it's so and so. You know, I mean, simple 15-second advertisement that is ongoing is needed in this regard.
Yes. Senator Gill?
In this case, yeah, I agree with you, Senator Floyd Morris. It is one of those provisions in law that promotes a kind of change in behavior and culture. But one of the good things about this to mark it as being successful is that at points in times, at intervals, we need to report how many reports have been made so that the public becomes aware that it's a well-utilized machinery. Once you start reporting it, that's a marker that, you know, it encourages others to utilize it and to do the same thing without fear.
Yes. Yes. Go
Sure,
ahead.
just a question. Is the objective just to impose a duty solely, or a duty and failure to undertake the duty to impose any form of offense or penalty, an offense to arise or a penalty? Because I'm looking at section 6
Of the Child Care
of the Child Care and Protection
Does
Act.
it have a penalty
when
attached?
it speaks to, yes, it does have a penalty attached.
What's
it
the
speaks
penalty?
to a prescribed person being a physician, nurse, dentist, or other health or mental health care professional, having the responsibility to any person who has information which causes that person to suspect that a child has been, is being, or is likely to be abandoned, neglected, or physically or sexually ill-treated, or is otherwise in need of care and protection, shall make a report to the registry. It says a prescribed person who, in the discharge of that person's duties, acquire information that ought reasonably to cause that person to suspect that a child has been, is being, or is likely to be abandoned, neglected, or physically or sexually ill-treated, or is otherwise in need of care and protection, shall make a report to the registry in accordance with the provisions of this section. Now, a person who contravenes subsection 2 or 3 commits an offense and shall be liable on summary conviction before, it says, a resident magistrate, but we all know it's a judge of the parish court, to a fine not exceeding $500,000 or to imprisonment to a term not exceeding 6 months, or to both such fine and imprisonment.
So based on what you would have read, would more align to our 3? Because 4 now in my mind would be speaking of persons that might be in a household or neighbor or a community who would have been aware, but not under the prescribed listing.
But hold on, Senator Gale. It's a 2-part duty that is set out in 6. So one duty is generally to any person, and the other is to the prescribed person.
To the prescribed person.
And both
the same
are
penalty?
subject to the same penalty. Right.
3.
I have a little difficulty with that, because you have in that the prescribed persons who would be more intimately aware of situations, as opposed to persons in a community or a neighbor.
No, but Senator Gale, I'm not sure I agree with you on that, because the prescribed persons are going to come upon a child when that child is brought to them. So,
Right.
so the person comes into the domain of the prescribed person.
Yes.
But for older persons, one of the things that I, in discussing with medical professionals and even some of the presenters who came here, the older persons are not always going to seek medical treatment. Some of them are at home self-medicating or whatever. And they may not necessarily come to the attention of what we would call a prescribed person.
I understand that, and I agree with that, It's just the penalties are similar in nature.
Right.
With the prescribed person or any other persons are aligned to the same set of penalties, the same set of scrutiny. But the circumstances of awareness may become different.
So what are you saying then? You would prefer, you would want a stronger or a less
For the
harsh?
prescribed persons, for the prescribed persons who are listed, who have a different kind of operative, a duty of care.
Right.
That's different.
Right.
Yeah? As opposed to someone who may be a family member or a relative or a distant relative that might become aware, should not be exposed to the similar kind of penalties. And so the distinction in this is that, 3 might not be limited, or 3 might not be limited to just medical professionals, but a prescribed listing. And our 4 now, they establish a duty of all persons other than the specified persons to report the incident. Now the question is, do we extend the penalties to those in 4? We're establishing a duty. a duty to ball out, to report, but are we extending that similar duty to penalties?
I would be in support of a penalty. I would be in support of a penalty. I mean, we can recommend, or we can say the committee maybe is divided on whether or not there should be a penalty. Senator Morris, what say you?
Well, I mean, I'm supportive of the formulation as is in terms of providing a penalty.
You mean like similar to the Child Care and Protection Act?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is sort of synchronizing established practice in law, because it is there in the Child Care and Protection Act, and it has not been challenged, or posed any legal problems so far.
Right. So are we then adopting that formulation, or is Senator Gale still uncomfortable?
I'm just thinking of the level of enforcement that is going to be required for this aspect of it. Because, you make a provision, but you want to ensure that it has the level of rigor to be able to enforce it. And this is going to require a deeper kind of investigation to take place.
Well, how I see these cases,
what would satisfy me is the extent of reporting in the Child Care and Protection Act, if it really works.
I think it does. I think it does. We do hear of them all the time. Schools as well. Schools are part of the prescribed list. I'm certainly aware of it at the level of schools having served on.
Paragraph 1. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Section 6, paragraph 1 states, prescribed person means a physician, nurse, dentist, or other health or mental professional. B, an administrator of a hospital facility. C, a school principal, teacher, or other teaching professional. D, a social worker or other social service professional. E, an owner, operator, or employee of a child daycare center or other child care institution. F, a guidance counsel. Or G, any other person who by virtue of his employment or occupation has responsibility to discharge a duty of care towards a child.
So there lies it. All of those persons under that rubric has a duty of care in their employment or otherwise. But for any other person now that you are encouraging, me being a neighbor and I hear over next door that the elder person is bawling out and I don't know what they're bawling out for.
Right, there's
and
no
I don't
legal
report
obligation.
it. There's no obligation. But we are encouraging these persons by a duty of care to report. And that's it. So the challenge is to impose a penalty on them if they don't report. Because there's no duty of care. It's like a cultural encouragement.
Or a moral obligation.
Or a moral obligation.
What I'm thinking...
Do we pursue penalties for moral obligations?
Well,
no.
hold on a second, Senator Gale, because we have to think about the recommendation that we're making in light of all the information that we have heard and had presented to us. And so your question is timely. Is this committee recommending that the public at large, that the society at large, has only a moral obligation to older persons who they know or suspect are being abused? Or are we saying that as a people, we ought to have more than a moral obligation, we ought to have a legal obligation? So we already have a legal obligation in relation to children. And the messaging from that is that we consider it such an important and serious crime that if we know of it, we have a legal duty to report it. Do we consider this in the same way? And I am inclined to say yes, based on the information that came before us.
Madam Chair,
One moment, Senator Morris.
So let me be clear. Let me be clear in terms of the legal obligation on the part of the public and the associated sanctions that may be imposed based on the Child Care and Protection Act. Could you just read it for me? I have no difficulty having a legal obligation, you know, but I want to know what is the associated penalty. Yes.
All right. Paragraph 4. A person who contravenes subsection 2, that is a failure to report based on the duty of care.
Who are these persons?
The persons are the prescribed persons.
There you go. You have a set of prescribed persons. And those prescribed persons have an obligation of a duty of care for reasons. Now, outside of the prescribed persons, you have Tom Stroke, John Brown, Outer Road. They have no legal obligation unless the legislation is specific in nature.
Right.
What I don't want to create is an expectation in law that is not enforceable.
You see,
Put that on again.
Senator Gill, let me tell you, because
Keep it.
a particular situation was brought to my attention some time ago of a senior citizen who was, she died, and it is suspected by residents in the community that she died from physical abuse. And there are individuals who are close to her who know of what transpired. But nobody, they will talk to individuals in and around the community about what they know, but they would never come forward to express it to the police or to the authorities. What do we do in such a situation? I believe that the law should create a mechanism where those individuals are liable to report.
Can I ask for counsel from the Ministry of Labor to just opine?
Yes, just some clarity with regards to the Child Care and Protection Act. If we look at subsection 2 does state that any person who has information which causes that person to suspect that a child, A, has been, is being, or is likely to be abandoned, neglected, or physically or sexually ill-treated, or B, is otherwise in need of care and protection, shall make a report to the registry.
All right.
Now, if we then go to subsection 4, which is the relevant penalty, it says a person who contravenes subsection 2 or 3. So it would mean that the penalty applies to any person as well as to the list of prescribed persons, in my view.
Okay, so that makes it clear. That makes it clearer to me.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
good.
It outlines specifically the obligation based on the fact that you have information. Yeah? So that makes it clearer to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we are agreed then that the two duties, the duty in respect of the specified persons, which would include the medical professionals, and the duty in relation to a person who has information, will both carry a penalty and carry the similar penalty, similar to the Child Care and Protection Act then. That's the structure.
Yes, yes. It's
Okay.
a similar formulation, just that we're replacing a child with that of an older person or senior citizen.
Then contemplation would have to be made to Section 2, Section 4, and 6 of the Child Care and Protection Act, the structure.
Yes. Yes, thanks. Okay. Number 5, provide for the protection of persons who, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. McCoy.
Madam Chair, I'm just asking for a little bit of clarity because in item 4 of our proposal, we're suggested that if persons other than the specified persons, that they should report incidents of suspected elder abuse. I'm just having a little.
Well, that's sort of my loose language, but I think we're clear now, having discussed it, that the formulation we're looking at is similar to the Child Care and Protection Act. So someone with information, etc.
Okay.
Thank you. That language. Tiffany?
Chair, before we proceed, just another issue. In terms of the Child Care and Protection Act, the fine is $500,000. Based on the nature, when we think about elderly persons and the penalty, would we want to increase that penalty?
We could recommend that. I don't feel that we need to labor on that matter. I think that's a matter when the draft is being done, that they can deal with that matter.
We're dealing with the principles.
Yes, the principles. So Senator Marks?
Yeah, man, I agree with you.
Okay. So 5, provide for the protection of persons who report suspected cases of elder abuse from retaliatory actions of others. Now, there were several recommendations to protect persons who report almost like whistleblowers, really. And the Whistleblower Act, the Protected Disclosures Act, doesn't cover this kind of protection because that act really contemplates the retaliation in the workplace, in an employment context. So I don't know if Ms. Roden can give us some guidance as to whether or not this has any, do we have any example of this kind of protection anywhere else in our legislative framework? That you can think of?
But Madam Chair, while she contemplated, it's a provision that I would want to see in the law because, it would give some coverage and encouragement to individuals who are not in the obligatory category to come forward and say what they know, and give them the assurance that they will have some form of protection.
Yes, okay.
So this really encourages, knowing that you have the confidence and you remove that extent of fear of retaliation.
Yes, again, I'm going to ask for the deletion of that word suspected. Had I had the benefit of the daylight morning, I probably wouldn't have put it there. So I think we can rest on the recommendation on principle. How it fits into the legislative framework is not for us. It's for those who are going to actually get down to the black and white drafting. So we are in agreement on 5. Number 6, provide for penalties to be imposed where persons with responsibility to act on or investigate reports of elder abuse fail to do so. Again, another recommendation that I believe came from more than one presenter.
I like this one because it has a double edge, to act but also to investigate. Because sometimes we take these things lightly. We're not about to investigate. A report is made and no investigation
is done, yes. Number 7, make provision for penalties to be imposed on persons who obstruct investigators inquiring into incidents of reported cases of elder abuse. This is a usual obstructing law enforcement officers or authorized officers. Number 8,
Yeah.
provide for reports of elder abuse to be made confidentially. And here I would say this recommendation should be nuanced to provide a mechanism for a confidential report, but not necessarily to mandate a confidential report. Would my colleagues agree with that nuance?
Agreed.
Okay. Number 9, establish a registry of persons convicted of elder abuse.
Clear.
Absolutely.
I could not just skip over this one.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so agreement. Number 10, provide for the licensing and registration of nursing homes, residential or long-term or community-based care facilities, and establish standards of care and penalties for non-compliance. Now this goes into the discussion we had in terms of the Nursing Homes Registration Act. And what we're essentially proposing based on the recommendations that have been made to us is that that act be repealed essentially and overhauled and subsumed into this act. Now, I have some concerns about that, colleagues, because I'm not so clear that these homes are only dealing with older persons. And so I would want us to send the message in our proposal that the act needs to be seriously looked at and to go through these recommendations that we have here that touch and concern it, but perhaps to leave the question of whether or not it sits in this legislation or it's a companion piece of legislation.
So you're quite right, Chair. Some of these homes, whilst they deal with older persons, and our scope is older persons, you have some of these homes that deals with persons with disabilities, not necessarily elders. Some of them I've seen are remedial in terms of being a stroke victim, for argument's sake, incapacitated, not necessarily elder. Our scope is for elder. So we have to be very careful in terms of the intended reach of this particular proposal. And if we could make it more specific in nature.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to be specific to older person.
Yeah.
Right. So then our recommendation then is in terms of the kinds of amendments and inclusions that we want to see, and we leave the question of whether or not the act is repealed and becomes a part of this, or is a standalone companion act. And there's another complication too, because Nursing Home Registration Act is dealt with by the Ministry of Health, and this act is likely to be dealt with by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. So I would imagine would cause some confusion. Go ahead, Dr. McCoy.
So, Madam Chair, I'm in agreement with what you're suggesting to let them remain separate, because it does cover private facilities, including surgeries, day surgeries facilities, among other things. So I think it would be too cumbersome to include that under provision for legislation for older adults.
Okay. So we put it as a recommendation.
We speak of established standards. The Ministry of Health might have a particular standard or a particular threshold that all of these community-based might not be at the same standard as a nursing home that is in the public space. So, go ahead.
Is, for example, to have like a twin bill scenario. So you have this Elderly Care and Protection Act being drafted, probably simultaneously in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. You could have also probably amendments or maybe a new bill being drafted simultaneously in regards to the Nursing Home Registration Act, because that's how we normally advocate as drafters. When you have two issues correlating, we operate in terms of a twin bill approach to the drafting and the policy.
So
Yeah,
we
it's just like the Disabilities Act and the Building Act, which makes provision for accessibility features. So the Disability Act speaks to it, and the Building Act speaks to it at the same time.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go through these recommendations, and that will be the language of our proposal then, that it recommend that. All right. So number 11, establish standards of care, qualifications of personnel, and quality oversight. I believe that was repeated several times. We're talking standards of care within these facilities, qualifications, credentials of the type of persons who can be employed in the facilities, and oversight of the facilities, presumably by the authorities responsible. Don't think that's anything we can disagree with. And to some extent, that exists in the Nursing Homes Registration Act, but as we heard, I think a big part of the problem is just resourcing and capturing those who are non-compliant, who are not registered, because there are more of those, and that there are those that are registered based on the information we had.
How do you treat, because in the protection of the elderly, you want to protect every elderly everywhere. So in a home, in a residential home, where, let's say, the children decides that they want someone to come in and look after their elderly, are we prescribing the same limit here for those persons? It may very well be a household helper, under quotation, you know. Are we prescribing the same threshold for these persons? Because you can't impose that.
I'm not sure I'd be supportive of that, only because, yes, the family might employ somebody, but ultimately the responsible person is the family.
Right. So the obligation would be on the family.
I think so.
Okay.
Can I ask Ms. Hamilton to take over from me so I can multitask a little bit better in the reading of the document for me? We're at page 2, number 12. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Just a quick question with regards to number 11.
Yeah.
Are the standards of care and qualifications for the personnel limited to individuals in the nursing home? Or are we also contemplating, for example, social workers?
I think well, social workers already have a professional standard, don't they?
We do, however, I don't think it's necessarily legislated per se. So if it's going to be input in legislation, then it would rather, I guess, further study by the ministry with regards to the particular standards therein.
I think the recommendation that was being made to us, that is captured here, was in relation to those working within facilities. That was the intent of the presenters at the time. But I do recall there were other places where they talked about, certainly I remember Ms. Sandra Latibadair talking about the use of social workers in relation to outreach and care and inspection and so on in relation to older persons. And I think I may have incorrectly assumed that there is a professional standard there because it is a professional body. No?
Yes, there are professional standards for social workers.
Yes.
There are professional standards, but to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been reduced into legislation per se. So there are particular standards that the ministry will look for when hiring social workers with regards to their training. However, to
But
the
is
best
there a
of
professional association that governs how they operate?
I'm not sure, but I'm being informed that there may in fact be one.
Yeah?
Well,
Okay, can somebody check that
Can
for
we
us,
check it
please?
out,
Yeah,
Madam
check that in the course of the meeting.
I
Thank
can
you.
understand if you are employed to a ministry or an agency or an institution, they would set their own professional standard.
Yes. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hampton.
Number 13. Mandate training and certificate. Okay. Provide for mandatory and regular audits, inspections, and evaluations of residential and long-term care facilities. 13. Mandate training and certification of workers to ensure quality care. 14. Establish a tribunal with the power to adjudicate in matters of breaches of the proposed act which are non-criminal in nature. 15. 15. Provide the tribunal with powers to issue protection orders and intervention orders in suspected cases of elder abuse, allowing for the removal of the older person to safe places where necessary.
Sure.
I'm sorry, team, I got distracted a bit. 13, so, okay, just to go. 12 is agreed? Yes?
Yes.
13
Yes.
is
Yes.
agreed? And
Yes.
14?
Now 14.
Okay, now,
Breaches of proposed act which are non-criminal in nature.
right. So recall now, we discussed yesterday the question of
Yes.
a tribunal that would adjudicate in matters dealing with older persons, but not in terms of criminal matters, which really are properly to go to the court,
Right.
and that's the body with the jurisdiction to deal with that. The question I have for my committee members, and I'm guided by the Legal Reform Department, who would have looked at some of the other legislation, is what are the kinds of matters that this tribunal would deal with? Now, I offer to my committee members also a reflection on the presentation of Ms. Sherry-Ann McGregor, who spoke to us about the grant of powers of attorney, the applications for guardianship, and also, what is it, powers of attorney, guardianship, and a third one that I'm not remembering right now. But the question of what is this tribunal adjudicating over? What do we see as coming before this tribunal? And perhaps Ms. Roden can assist us in terms of the legislation that you would have looked at. Would they have had tribunals in those jurisdictions, and what kinds of matters would have been heard by them?
Yes, Madam Chair, one of the things that I can point to is, for example, if senior citizens are confronted with discrimination because they are senior citizens, you know, and if their rights are being violated by individuals / institutions within the society. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I anticipate that the tribunal would deal with.
Right. And I agree with you. Certainly that matter that the Mrs. Browers from the Matildas organization had raised with us would definitely be a matter that could properly be dealt with by such a tribunal. But I want us to give it a little thought, and I may move past this to give legal reform a chance just to look back at their notes and deal with some of the others, because I did tell you yesterday that this and the commission and the advocate were going to detain us a little bit. So can we put that in the parking lot for the moment?
Agreed, Chair.
And then move towards, so 14, 15, and 16 touch and concern the tribunal.
Right.
So if we put...
But Madam Chair,
Yes,
just let me ask,
yeah.
Is there any fundamental difference of opinion where members are concerned with the tribunal?
No. Senator Morris, I am not in dispute of having a tribunal. I just want to know what is the scope of the tribunal and what kind of cases are going to go before the tribunal. So we already established that the criminal offenses belong somewhere else. But I don't want us to establish a tribunal that is just sitting there. And you would have made reference to some issues with institutions that may create challenges for the elderly, discriminate against the elderly, that could go before a tribunal. But I'd want to understand that there are a list of issues that the elderly may be exposed to that ought to be properly put before a tribunal. Because one of the things that we are seeking to do is to prevent these from happening, and for every and anybody to know that there is a scope before a tribunal to deal with these matters and the consequential effect that will be established.
Yes. So, Madam Chair, I must indicate that when we fashioned the Disability Rights Tribunal, it was called a Disability Rights Tribunal because we looked at the various rights of persons with disabilities that have been transgressed over the years. So in this instance, issues of healthcare, issues relating to banking services and all of those things, could be cited. But I think the legal officers can look at the formulation under the Disabilities Act and see what are the things that the Disability Rights Tribunal deals with.
Senator.
Go ahead.
I looked at the Indian,
that was the one.
the elderly care under India, and they had a tribunal that deals with adjudicating and deciding upon maintenance for the elderly. They also have the powers of a civil court for the purposes of taking on evidence and enforcing attendance of witnesses and compelling the discovery and production of documents. I also looked at the Disability Act, the tribunal, some of the responsibilities. And when you look, they deal with complaints of discrimination, breaches of the act, powers to conduct investigation. They also can make an order to pay compensation or make a declaration as to the rights of the party or any complaint. So these are some of the responsibilities of the tribunal.
You see, that one speaks to maintenance, and there are many things that can fall under maintenance, including financial obligations, the kind of support that a household must provide to the elderly. All of that can fall under maintenance.
Yeah, but and those are non-criminal,
And
you know.
no, those are non-criminal.
Right.
They are considered serious expectations, but don't rise to the level of criminality.
Right. So those are things that if you're looking for a justification
Yes.
for the work of the tribunal,
Yes.
those are some of the
Those are
issues,
some of the things.
you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are there.
Yeah. So I don't think we need to detain ourselves, Madam Chair, to go back over that. I think the legal team could formulate, you know.
Okay. So the language here is sufficient for you? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. McCoy?
Madam Chair, I want to respond to 13, so you can wrap this and then
To 13?
I make an intervention.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
go ahead.
All right, so the language here is sufficient for members in terms of our recommendation? Yes, okay. So 14 we agreed. 15, go ahead, Ms. Hamilton.
Sorry.
I'm coming right back to you
Okay.
on 13.
Provide the tribunal with powers to issue protection orders and intervention orders in suspected cases of elder abuse, allowing for the removal of the older person to safe places where necessary.
Again, remove that suspected word. Senator Morris, Senator Gale?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Number 16?
16, provide for the powers and duties of the tribunal to mediate, arbitrate, and settle in matters related to older persons. 17,
Yes.
codify.
No, before you go to 17, let me go back to 13 to Dr. McCoy.
All right, so thanks, Madam Chair. I wanted to just raise a point here as far as 13 is concerned, suggesting in terms of mandate training and certification of workers to ensure quality care, just to indicate that there are no industry standards in terms of training and certification
Of caregivers.
of caregivers. So we would need to first establish the standards.
And I believe that was the recommendation that we got. Maybe I didn't capture
Right.
it very well in how I said that, but
Okay.
I'm trying to see if I have captured it somewhere else. I might have, I might not have. But that, in fact, was the recommendation that we got from multiple presenters. I recall certainly Mona Aging and Wellness. A number of the individual presenters also said so. I believe Ms. Latibaudiere also opined that was needed, caregiving, standards of caregiving. And so I think the language some of them used too was even code of conduct or something like that. So can we amend 13 to include that then, to establish standards for caregivers, set standards for caregivers, and mandate training and certification. And that would be even an establishment of a official profession in the area. I mean, we have people who perform the functions of caregivers now, some without training, some perhaps with some training, you know, practical nurse training, that kind of thing. But
Is that what they call the silver economy, Madam Chair?
I think so. Is it? No?
Is that?
It's the silver economy, in my mind, is for the same people we are protecting, to
okay.
giving them an opportunity to be entrepreneurs and to do work.
Okay.
But what this does is that those entities or institutes that can provide the training, if we know setting that threshold, they are in good business.
Yeah. Okay, so we can now go to 17, Ms. Hamilton. Thank you. We're now at the issue of legal rights and framework, colleagues, that in terms of how the matrix was set out. Go ahead.
Codify the rights of older persons, including right to dignity, autonomy, and participation in decision-making affecting their lives, etc., consistent with the rights adopted and recognized in the National Policy for Senior Citizens. 18,
Hang on a second, I just want to make sure my colleagues are okay. So 17 captures the constant urging that we had to enshrine the rights of older persons in statute. And those rights, of course, would be similar to what we've captured in the national policy and consistent with the international framework.
Yes. I was looking for the word international framework.
Yes, we can add that in. But I think
Yeah.
that is what the national policy captures, what the international framework sets out. Okay, go ahead. 18.
All right, 18. Establish the age at which...
Can you pull your mic a little closer? Yeah. There you go.
Establish the age at which a person can be designated an older person.
I know Senator Morris made some interventions in relation to the UN standard of 60 years old.
Right.
I obviously had to include it here because it was a matter that was urged upon us by more than one presenter.
Yes. And Professor Shearer was clear on that.
Yes, that it is 60 years.
Yeah.
Very well.
19, consider increasing the statutory retirement age.
This was a recommendation of the Ministry of Health, yes.
20.
But hold on. Because it said considered increasing the statutory retirement age to what? Is that from the 65 that we are at now, or what it is?
Well, it would have to be because, well, certainly public sector workers are at 65. Is that across the board, or is it private and public? Go ahead, Ms. Roden.
That was my concern when I read it, because I wanted to know what was the proposed age limit, and there was a recent amendment to the retirement age for public sector workers to 65. And I believe that there is not a national retirement age. So I think it's something that we have to consider some more.
Yes,
and also bear in mind as well that the public sector pension is a phase basis based on their age. Then you know at what age, what period you become be eligible for your retirement. So is it that we have reached that, completed that phase already?
Of the phase of? When you say phase?
In a sense that based on your age, it determines when it is that you reaches the age of retirement. It is in the schedule.
Yeah.
Right.
In the public sector, that has gone to the 65. But in the private sector, it varies. An employer will decide.
Yes. Right,
or
there's
a
no national
pension rule will decide. And some vary. Some will say 60, some say 62. Some say the man must go at 60, or the woman must go at 60 and the man can go at 63. It differs. What I'm gathering is that the Ministry of Health would have suggested that life expectancy is going to progress. They would have suggested that there are some persons who want to look to continue to earn based on a particular age. What this is going, I don't think we can define it. There is a suggestion in my mind to examine it, but it's going to cause or trigger a kind of debate or conversation that needs to take place in the society. Because if we are going to pursue this, there has to be some reasonable understanding. You have some persons now who, you know, we would have said, Chair, let's look at the improving the retirement age. And some who already made up their mind that they want to leave at 60 because the rule says 60, is saying to us, you're mad? Let's not go there because I have already prepared to leave. You have some workers who want to leave, young workers who want to leave already.
Yes.
So it is going to require a kind of conversation. I think the context to which these discussions were was suggesting that part that relies on the silver economy to earn in your future years because you are going to be a dependency on somebody if you retire at a particular age and you don't have any provision. So it was being suggested to go a little longer, but it's going to require a kind of discussion.
Yeah,
so I don't think we can
agree with you
infuse it
fully.
in law without having that kind of public consultation. Now you really have to know what people wish and what are going to be the remedies in support. Again, remember we talked about ageism. And some people want to run you out of the workplace because you reach a particular age. And some employers might believe that you really need to go.
Yes.
So it's going to require a conversation.
Sorry,
Yes,
Chair.
I do agree fully with Senator Gale because this is a matter that will require national consultation. And I don't know if I would put it in the matrix as a part of our recommendation for this law.
Well, it's in the matrix because it was given to us, but we won't propose it in our report.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Very
right.
well.
Sorry.
Okay,
We can
thank
move
you.
on.
No, hold on. Sorry, Chair, if I just make one intervention.
Yes.
Just to note on this particular talking point that National Insurance Act does allow persons to work up until the age of 70,
yes.
at which time they'll get their old age pension.
Yes, that was mentioned to us as well. Thank you so much. Ms. Hamilton, thank you.
20. Enact provisions for maintenance of older persons and empower older persons, their representatives, or a proposed older person's advocate to apply to the proposed tribunal for maintenance orders. 21.
Agreed?
Sorry if I may.
And this colleagues would require a recommendation for the amendment of the Child Care and Protection Act to remove the maintenance provisions applicable to older persons from that act so that they're dealt with in this one.
Sorry,
Yes, go
Chair,
ahead, Counsel.
just some clarification. I'm just querying whether the consequential amendment would actually be made to the Maintenance Act.
Sorry, you're right. That's an error. That's an error. Maintenance Act, thank you. That's an error.
21.
21.
Define the persons who may be held liable for maintenance of older persons. 22.
This discussion, colleagues, was surrounding who was the relative, who was the person who could be responsible. It came in two places. It came from the Ministry of Health in relation to persons who should be responsible for older persons when they are discharged from the hospital and who should be responsible for costs and other matters. And it also came from the presentation from Ms. Sherry-Ann McGregor, who spoke to us in relation to who we define as next of kin, who can make an application for, who we define as next of kin, who can be responsible for the payment of maintenance. She also spoke about it in the context of applications for guardianship as well. So if we can just flesh that out to indicate the intent there.
It has to be fleshed out because it's speaking to my mind two things. Those who are eligible to do something and those who we might be forcing for the maintenance. Because I believe one of the submissions indicated that you would be laying powers on possibly a child who that parent never looked after. And so you'd be forcing that child to now be the responsible guardian. So there has to be a kind of fleshing out in terms of what are the markers in this, because I can see some children saying, not me.
You know, we've had the discussion about that circumstance several times, and I certainly know...
Gail, why are you throwing words?
You know, Senator Morris, I'm always in my line of sight of making recommendations to law. Look at how it will work. And what's the possible outcome and response?
Yes.
and the scenario, Senator Gale, which we've spoken about many times, is a real one, and it's not an uncommon one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, in talking about it, it never occurred to me before now that our recommendation perhaps ought to be in cases that what includes those persons are situations where it can be shown that the parent was present and participatory. And that can be done through various mechanisms. I can think of, you know, simply affidavit of somebody maybe not related to the person who is in a position to know and who can put an affidavit before the court, before the tribunal, and indicate that, yes, I am aware that John Brown was a father to this child and did look after this child and did participate in this child's life. I think those details can be fleshed out at the time of the drafting, because it would require some further research. But I think we can make the recommendation subject to, with that caveat that they take a look at it under those circumstances.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
And it is very important here, you see, because how we frame it can be a game changer in terms of individuals' care of their children, because it cannot be that individuals don't care and support their children, and yet still the law compels those children to care and protect for the parents at a later stage. So, you know, again, it can be a game-changing provision, and we ought to also make sure that public education takes place for features like this, you know, to say to parents, look, man, and take care of your pitney.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Senator Morris. Number 22.
22, provide for the grant of lasting or durable powers of attorney to allow older persons to grant the power to a person of their choice to make decisions in respect of their health, property, finances, and other matters, and any other matter.
And in this case, no, what we were urged to do was to enact specific legislation. So this sort would be almost like a companion, but to enact specific legislation setting out this framework. And I don't hold the view that these kinds of provisions should be contained in this legislation, but that we would recommend that this new legislation is essential to support this law that we're proposing, because a power of attorney does not have to be between an older person and somebody else. It's used all the time, no matter the age. So members are in agreement?
Yes, Madam Chair. But, you know, Madam Chair, there's something that just jumped at me. how can we, I don't know if we can legislate it, but how can we encourage senior citizens that once they reach, say, the age of 60, which we as senior citizens, to start putting in place measures whereby, these John Brown is seen as their official next of kin who can conduct business on their behalf if there is a problem. How do we capture that in law?
Well, I think that's exactly what Ms. McGregor had suggested is captured by a lasting and durable power of attorney. Remember her counsel to us that even now, what exists now, if you grant a power of attorney to someone and you then become mentally incapacitated, the grant of the power ceases, and that document becomes invalid at that point. In fact, I have in my own practice the experience of sending powers of attorney to the bank, or clients coming in and saying, boy, I have this power of attorney, but because my mom is now mentally unable, the bank no longer is recognizing it. I can't get any money out of her account to look after her care. So what Ms. McGregor was suggesting, I think, would lend itself to the kind of preparation that you're urging, Senator Morris, because if you are to put it in place, then it stands if you are mentally incapacitated, and that's something that you can do preemptively.
Save and accept. If you put it in for perpetuity, you have a situation where you might just very well be transgressing the rights of the person when he or she is fully capacitated.
Explain that, because that person would have taken a decision that if in the event that I am incapacitated, John Brown is the person who is to have this power and to manage my affairs.
Okay, so that is how it would be framed.
Yeah.
That is how it would be framed.
Right.
Okay, because what I thought is that, you read 60 and you have this document, right. Then whosoever it is that you designate would be able to act whilst you are 61, 62 until you becomes incapacitated.
Right. Well, personally, I would say two things. One is that you can specify the power. So you can specify the commencing event that
yes.
that puts the power in play, and you can determine the period during which the power is to last. But
right.
in terms of the lasting power of attorney, what Council McGregor was imploring on us is the use of it as a tool to operate when older persons became mentally incapacitated.
And I would support that formulation that you have suggested.
Right. Okay, so we can tidy up this language a little bit, and the committee's agreed on that. 23, Ms. Hamilton, thank you.
23. Enact provisions to govern how competence to grant the power is to be determined by the court, and allowing for the validity of the grant of the power to continue even after mental incapacity of the grantor. 24, enact provisions for applications to be made for guardianship orders.
So this matter, of course, we had extensive discussion on this, and it requires amendment to the Mental Health Act. But colleagues I know are agreed on that. 25?
25, define the category of persons who can apply for guardianship orders and expand said categories beyond next of kin or nearest relative, and allow for persons residing outside of the country to apply for guardianship with necessary safeguards to protect the rights of the older person. 26, establish guidelines for the court to make decisions about the incapacity of persons, taking into consideration the possibility that older persons may refuse to be assessed by a medical professional and incapacity may not be constant. Under healthcare and mental illness.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Morris?
Here is an issue. Is this a matter that would be for the criminal courts or a matter that would be dealt with by the tribunal?
It is a matter, if we're saying the tribunal can look at guardianship orders, then it would be a matter for the tribunal. But let me just ask the tech team, in cases where you do have a tribunal, does it preclude you from taking the matter to court? Not all cases, not all tribunals remove the right to take the matter to court. I know the IDT in some cases does.
It depends on the policy intent of the legislation.
Right.
Because there are some legislation where you have the tribunal, and then you have a provision that states that the decision of the tribunal is final. But there are other legislation, depending on the policy intent, that says if the person is discontented with the decision of the tribunal, then the matter can be taken to the court.
Right. And I think I would be more in support of the latter.
So that one suggests that there can be an appeal on both sides. But take the IDT, a matter going to court is that the tribunal would have been making their judgment outside of the requirement of the law. It would have caused an error in judgment. So it's a specific in terms of that trigger that would go to the courts. What you're suggesting in this one is that it would appear to be an appellate approach of some sort on either party.
Yes. And so members are recommending that pathway for the review of the court be recommended, be proposed. Yes? Senator Gailey thinking about it?
I'm thinking about it.
Senator Morris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, let us get back to it and
Okay.
a little later. But you know, I would my initial inclination is to allow for appeals, but we can come back at it.
Okay, all right, we put this in the parking lot. Go ahead.
Healthcare and mental illness, 27. Mandate accessible, affordable, and age-friendly healthcare using multidisciplinary team approach.
Many of the recommendations that the presenters made in relation to matters to do with healthcare and mental illness were recommendations dealing with policy and administrative protocols and not legislative protocols. I've captured this one here because it was said in more than one presentation, this right of access to affordable health care. Now, I'm not sure how committee members feel about this. It is a matter that it seems logical. I don't have any difficulty with it, but I don't know about enshrining it in the law. We already have a public health system that all persons have access to. We have community health centers, and there is, I know, a robust program that has been rolled out and is in the process of being rolled out in terms of the Ministry of Health's engagement with older persons at the community level and the work of community health aides and even mental health aides, I believe. So I would be more comfortable leaving this in the remit of the executive arm, the administrative bodies.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Is this a part of the concern that Senator Longmore had? Is this?
I don't recall. I don't recall, Senator Morris. I don't recall that.
Okay.
One more. Let me just make sure that my colleagues are agreed or not agreed.
No, I agree with you. I don't, you say from you use the term mandate. Mm-hmm. It poses a critical obligation for the provision any and everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Wow.
It's nice to have, but can we mandate it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it has some deep implications.
To provide it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to mandate it means that nobody can fall below accessibility, affordability, and how you determine affordability. So when you lock all these requirements into a mandatory action, it becomes harder to pursue. I wouldn't do it coming out of this. We can encourage it.
Yes. Okay. All right. So this one is a no. 28.
Under social protection and income security, 28, make provisions for assignment of responsibility to relatives of older persons to mitigate against abandonment of older persons once discharged. 29.
Colleagues, this one came from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. If you recall, it's a problem with persons in the hospitals who can't be discharged because no relatives come for them.
Drop them off and leave them.
Drop them off and leave them, yes, and even return them to the hospital. I'm not so sure we can legislate that. It's definitely a problem that the public health system has, but I don't know how we legislate that in this law.
But isn't that a form of abuse, Madam Chair?
Abandonment?
Yes.
You know, we don't have abandonment included as a part of the definition that we discussed. We have neglect.
We have neglect.
But not abandonment. And perhaps, yeah, perhaps it needs
It should be, yeah.
Okay, so we would
we'll
go back to number 1 to include that. Neglect and abandonment. Okay. Okay, and in that case then we don't need 28 because it would fall as Senator Morris is suggesting. Okay?
But this is
Yeah.
a matter though that the Ministry of Health needs to deal with.
Right. It's an administrative
It's
issue.
an administrative issue, and I recall when the matter came up, I asked about the question of the tracer study, because Floyd Morris dropped off his grandmother. And he would have filled up the necessary forms giving contact information. But in the midst, Floyd Morris migrated. There's nobody to contact. It is an administrative issue that, I mean, the ministry and the hospitals or agencies or health centers, wherever, they have to improve their protocols internally to treat with this. It can't be that you just drop off and you fill out a form and you don't even know where that form went.
Yeah.
And then at the end result, when the patient is ready to be discharged, there's nobody there.
Okay, so 28 is disagreed. 29,
Mandate removal of banking fees for older persons.
Now, this was one where I believe there was a recommendation to review the banking.
yes, and this is a recommendation, I think, from CCRP.
Yes.
Um,
And I believe Mona Institute of Aging, Dr. Shearer did speak to this in terms of the banking.
in terms of fees. I'm not sure we can.
But can we do it in our
No,
legislation?
No, we
we
can't.
can't.
We can't.
Right.
We can
but
recommend that
We
it be
can
reviewed.
recommend.
That the Banking Act,
Right,
that
be reviewed.
amendment be done to the amendment
Yes.
of the Banking Act.
Right.
But I'm not sure that, I'm not even sure that you can mandate that in law. You're telling private enterprise that they're not allowed to charge a
Fees.
customer because of the customer's age. I'm not convinced that, go ahead.
Thinking about it, it would have to be a discussion undertaken with the Ministry of Finance
And the
Bank
And the
of
banks,
Jamaica and
right.
overall the banks in
And the
general.
banks in general.
Right, so it goes beyond just legislating. It
Yeah.
has to be a policy decision.
Decision,
that is
right,
in line
right.
with our fiscal responsibilities as a country. So there are more implications than just automatically legislating. We have to think about policy and fiscal responsibility when we,
Because
undertake.
I am just seeing where you impose this on the banks, and the same bank transfer that cost somewhere else.
To me and you.
Yes, we have to take it
But
up.
not only that, I don't know if you can impose it on the banks because you are interfering now with their ability to trade, interfering with, in a way that I don't know is permissible. I mean, I'd have to research it, but I don't know that
It
that's
is going to
permissible.
require, Chair, a discussion because it's really an issue. And again, we have the elderly who the banks are migrating to use alternative channels of operations. They're saying to you, don't come into the banking hall. Use the alternative channels. And when you use the alternative channels, those alternative channels might attract some cost because of the expediency and the efficiency in relation to it. That's how banks make money. And that's how the bank make the money that it can pay the workers that I represent. But it is a real challenge, but it's one that there has to be some level of consultations because remember again, some of the banks are not domiciled to Jamaica. So they
Yeah.
take their instructions from another port of origin. And they might not necessarily, that port of origin might not necessarily align to the instructions. And so we don't want to impose this kind of scripture that a bank today will decide it's better to operate somewhere else.
And Senator Gale, in light of our recommendations to make sure that these financial institutions have the necessary facilities to accommodate our senior citizens,
Oh, that we can
talking
press
about,
for.
yes,
That we can
bathrooms
press
and so
for.
forth.
Yes.
Right. Yes, we have to balance it and make sure that
When
fairness
you want the senior
obtains.
citizens to come there, but
Yes.
you can't provide the restroom facility to support that senior citizen. Here, so them can't use it because where it's located, it round the back. And it's in sterile areas. Yeah? But the senior citizen is a customer, and the senior citizen, by the very nature of their age, they're going to be feeling inconvenience.
Yes, agree with you.
Sorry if I may, Chair. Was any consideration possibly given to, rather than removing the bank fees, subsidizing the fees? I think that's something we could consider.
Again, that's a conversation. That's why it needs a
That's a
conversation.
policy issue.
So colleagues, the recommendation is that we're proposing that the relevant authorities engage discussions with the Bank of Jamaica and the Bankers Association to see how, to see whether it is possible to reduce or eliminate fees in relation to older persons. I mean, even as I'm saying that, I'm thinking to myself that just not practical. But I understand the intent of the recommendation. The intent was to help to alleviate the hardship of those older persons who may be struggling, they're on a fixed income, or they don't have no pension, but they have to engage with the banks. So we can word it in a way to ask for some consideration and discussions to be engaged in terms of how the burden can be lifted from those older persons, because it's not all older persons who fall in that category either. So will the committee just allow us to just reword that with that intent?
The intent is clear.
Okay, very well. Ms. Hamilton, thank you.
30, establish protocols for employment of older persons after retirement.
And this was a discussion. I did not believe this was a legislative proposal so much. It's really more administrative and encouraging. But I just wanted to ensure that the committee members just recalled it and endorsed it.
31, establish financial or tax incentives to persons who offer to assist older persons who do not have family members.
Now, this recommendation came from the Jamaica Psychiatric Association. Remember, we had that very excellent presentation. And the suggestion here, which was novel to me, was that where it sought to address the situation of older persons needing support and needing assistance, and where older persons who were alone, who didn't have any family members in the country, could be supported by persons in the community, that some sort of incentive, or whether it's a financial incentive, some sort of payment, or through the Social Security system, I would presume, or some sort of tax incentive if they are in business, could be implemented. it's again a policy initiative, but I, in particular, thought of, in expanding this recommendation, thought of businesses who perhaps may wish to support the care of an older person through such a person in the community actually doing that caregiving, and who would financially offer some support and would be rewarded with some sort of tax incentive, tax break, tax credit for doing so. It is a way, I think, to encourage the business community also to get involved. Corporate Jamaica does a lot of social outreach through, many of them through established foundations. But for small entrepreneurs who may not be able to help at the level of a large company, they may well be willing and in fact maybe eagerly willing to support the care of an older person in the community where their business is, for argument's sake. And the commendation for that could be some sort of tax credit from the state, recognizing that the support of that older person by the business community through the community caregiver would alleviate the burden on the state in terms of the care of that older person and the amount of state resources that had to be directed to the care of that older person. So I thought I would share my expanded thoughts on this recommendation that came from the Jamaica Psychiatric Association.
Chair, it is a novel kind of approach that must not go unnoticed. We can't just drive past it. It is worth exploring because it is seeking to provide support from an expanded reach. As you have indicated, there might be large organizations that can lend support and get the incentive. And in working it out, you can look at the different kinds of threshold. That might be, I don't want to use the term levied, but more, as the incentive. And for the, as you would have indicated, for those in the community type business that are most closer in nature, if they can provide the level of service and get a little break.
Yeah.
So it is worth exploring.
Yeah.
And coming from this committee as a recommendation, it ought to be pursued.
So what we may do then, Ledge Council, is include a small section in terms of the non-legislative recommendations and proposals. So we pull those out of the legislative portion and capture these. I think there have been about 2 or 3 of them so far. Capture these in that section, okay? Very well, thank you.
32, provide for benefits such as paid time off for care or job protection for informal caregivers.
I'm not recalling which one of the submissions had that one.
If it was specific in nature. Because even if you're an informal caregiver, there are remedies in law around the protection of your employment. I don't know about things such as paid time off. Because we can, if you're an employee, you have the rights under the Holiday with Pay Act for vacation leave. So there are already provisions in law. The issue is that you have some people who employ these people who are not providing those provisions. But there's a remedy to where Mr. John Paul Watson resides that deals with that on a daily basis if reported. But this is just one chair that is signaling that there are concerns in this particular area. But we already have remedies in law to treat with that.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
Okay. Okay, so no to 32.
You could just, for the essence that it came up as an issue, we could put it as part of the reporting, as flagging it. Sometimes these things are worthy of repeating for the reinforcement that there are real issues out there for the protection of these poor caregivers.
So part of reporting.
Part of reporting.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just for some clarification, with regards to the paid time off, are we making reference to potentially paid time off if, for example, I need to leave work at 3 p.m. to go and take care of my elderly grandmother? Because if we look at, for example, some occupational safety and health legislation, where the law where the law mandates that, for example, a particular employee at the workplace needs to be trained. And for example, if this training is provided by a separate institute where they may have to leave work during the day and go to the institute, some of these legislations do in fact stipulate that the time that the employee takes off to go and for training, they must be paid for. So the employer has to pay them for that period of time they're not at work. So I'm just wondering if that was the thought process behind this position.
I'm not sure. Looking back now, I realize it was a recommendation of Ms. Latibodir, but I'm not recalling the context so well. Can I just ask us to check back that submission?
Yeah.
And we can come back to it.
The thing with that, is that the request for paid time off, you might open a kind of can of worm. That everybody all of a sudden have a grandmother. And some people will say they have 3 grandmothers when you really only can have 2. And so it becomes an open sesame. It really should be confined to the policy within the employment scripture, because the occupation, if it is referencing the occupational safety and health proposed legislation, I believe it may be specific in nature rather than extended to this particular scenario.
So it's found, pleasant afternoon, members.
Just now.
It's found on page 2 and 3 of Ms. Latibodir's submission. She explains more particularly on page 3 that the Act should address mandatory training and certification of care workers in relation to paid care work to ensure quality care. In addition, it should apply labor laws regarding minimum wage and protection of professional workers. She also states that the She made mention of the fact that informal caregivers who are still in the workforce are to benefit from paid leave or paid time off and have some job protection.
So I remember when I was going through the matrix yesterday, I wanted some clarity on what she referenced as minimum wage. because we have, whilst we have a minimum wage regime, there was a time when we had two different kinds of minimum wage. Minimum wage for the lowest paid, a standard for regular workers, as opposed to that of the security guards, at being at a different level. I was wondering if she was speaking to a specific minimum wage for this specific category of caregivers, different from the regular minimum wage, because some jurisdictions have that in terms of an industry wage. Or was she suggesting that they are paid below the minimum wage and they ought to be protected?
It appears to be
It
the latter.
appears to be that one.
Yes. So what
Well,
she's-
there's a remedy to deal with that.
So for her specific words, she said, regarding unpaid caregivers, and this is on page 2 of her submission, regarding unpaid caregivers, the Act should address income insecurities for unpaid caregivers excluded from the formal workforce. Such consideration should focus on the respite care and non-contributory social insurance details to be worked out with an established caregiver committee or best practices from other countries. On the other hand, for informal caregivers who are still in the workforce, there should be some kind of benefit either at the organizational or national policy level, for example, paid time off for care or job protection. So it would appear that this submission, especially as it pertains to the provision that we're contemplating now, is that she's seeking to lobby on behalf of those persons who are informal caregivers, who are still a part of the workforce, who may otherwise not receive the sufficient protection if they need to leave at any point during the workday to attend to the care of the elderly that they are guardians for.
It's a whole different scenario of an expanded nature. You know, you have a grouping in Jamaica that's very effective now, the Jamaica National Household Workers Association, that they form themselves in a trade union, and they have lobbied very well, and I commend them for the work that they have done. There's a grouping. And, you know, if the needs be, nothing is wrong with forming a trade union, if I may say. And, you know, this grouping that is going to be a grouping of a kind of part of the workforce that is going to be needed for the future, yeah? In terms of caregivers. Because as we're asking for, we're looking at life expectancy, moving to a particular level, people growing older, there's going to be the need for that duty of care. So I'm seeing this group as a growing group, and they need to formalize themselves of some sort. But I'm only pitching out that out there, not trying to organize.
Well, we have been urged, and we have said it, that we need to create certification and standards for care workers.
So we're formalizing it?
Yep, we're formalizing it, absolutely. Okay, go ahead.
33, include provisions to facilitate reverse mortgage frameworks, NHD, to support financial independence of older persons.
This was a recommendation of Mrs. Duncan Sutherland. I know, I understand it used to be done. I think Prof. Shearer had opined that it used to be done. And I did receive a note from a citizen who shared with me the application document or the mortgage document from some years ago, where they were able to take a reverse mortgage loan on the on the parents' home, which allowed them to care for the parents until the parents passed away, and then they were able to then sell the home and to discharge the mortgage at that point. So and the option would be that you can sell to discharge the mortgage, or you can just make the payments and repay the mortgage and keep the asset. I like it, but I don't think it's a legislated matter.
No,
I
it's
think
not.
that's for private sector to take up.
It is policy driven in nature. It may have been part of a policy in the trust that somehow fell off or
No,
not
I believe
utilized.
the bank actually, I believe it was Jamaica National who used to do it. I don't know that they still do it, but
Right.
yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with kind of, do you say, re-exploring this kind of policy?
Yes, we can make the recommendation in the non-led section, yeah.
Yeah, but Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I'd stepped away a little bit, but this is a very interesting point that I just came back in. This reverse mortgage, you're right, Jamaica National had implemented it some time ago, but I understand that there were some problems with its implementation here in Jamaica. But what I wanted to find out, so you take a mortgage on a property, and when you have a mortgage, it is expected that you're going to make monthly payment.
Yes.
How is that monthly payment done in terms of, is it that the bank allow you to forego the monthly payments with the understanding that down the road the property could be sold and the loan be liquidated? What's the procedure?
No, my understanding in discussing it with the gentleman who shared it with me was that there was a monthly payment, and it seems as if he had to be a part of the loan application along with his parent who owned the property. And so he took on the burden of the payment while the lump sum was able to be discharged, to discharge the parents' medical needs and caregiving needs. So it's not that there is a monthly payment, but I think it's some sort of, my understanding, it was some sort of joint approach to the application. So not just the homeowner, but also the person who was going to make the payment. I mean, I see this as something that would be ideal for those children who don't necessarily have the capacity to pay medical bills, and for those older persons who don't have cash to pay medical bills, which can be quite hefty. And also when they need long-term care and at-home care, nurses at home are not cheap. It's not it's not an inexpensive.
But I was just looking at it to say, if it is that you can't afford the medical bills, you can't afford to pay for a caregiver, how is it that you are going to be able to service that mortgage that is taken out?
Well,
the thing about it, Senator Morris, is that, remember the chair spoke about owning the asset at a point in time so they could look at it as an investment.
But also, I would think, I mean, this is for the bankers to figure out when they assess their mortgage packages, but I would think that if you are looking to draw down on the value of your home, that you would be drawing down enough that would allow you to deal with the medical needs as well as allow you to service the payments for a period of time.
Yeah. Well, it has, been brought to my attention in a number of forums. So, I'm just trying to see how it works, and I was told that Jamaica National had introduced it some time ago, but it has not made any traction in Jamaica.
Yes. So are we recommending a look at that?
Yeah, I would not rule it out.
In law?
Not in law.
Not in law.
Not in law.
No, not in law. But asking
As part of the recommendations.
in terms of initiatives that can help to support older persons.
Yes. One of them, Chair, that I didn't hear from any of the presenters, but certainly would have reached my ear.
Pull in mic.
Certainly would have reached my ear, would have been either an exemption in property tax or a reduction in the property tax rate. In relation to the elderly. You own the property, you're no longer employed, but you have to deal with this property tax that is based on the value of the property. And certainly, you don't want to be, because of affordability of that investment, you are burdened with this extent of property tax, but you're not employed, and you have to find that property tax to pay. And I believe it needs to be looked at very seriously as to what exemption can be provided at that level, or a reduction in the interest rate or the rates applicable to remove the burden of the property tax. So it never came, but I want to suggest it.
No, man, I think I'm almost certain it wasn't a proposal from Jean Lorichin made in that regard.
Well, let's look at it.
Yes, I think she may have also made some proposals.
Yeah, I think she made, and it's something that...
So I'm not alone.
But you are not alone on the committee either, because, it's something that I am prepared to give support. Because, as senior citizens, take, for example, those who work in the government sector, and they get their pension, and their pension, is significantly below what individuals from the private sector would earn as their pension. And, I wonder how the pension is also subject to income tax as well. What can we do to ease the burden on these pensioners? And so I would support that. But again, is this an administrative matter?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, because this is a money bill matter, and we don't have the authority to impose any taxes or tax reduction. But it can be recommended.
We have the authority to make recommendations.
Absolutely.
Very well. We're at
34.
34, housing infrastructure and accessibility.
Establish care standards for old age homes subject to routine inspections.
And this is consistent with the requirement for standards for nursing homes and long-term care facilities that we dealt with. So yes, we have already agreed that. Go ahead.
35, establish duties for the Commission on Strata Corporations to ensure the well-being of older persons in strata communities and the absence of harassment and discrimination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is what the rep from the Matilda's Corner
District Association.
District Association was talking about.
Yes. I'm in support of this one.
36, provide for the establishment of a fund to support home retrofitting for older persons.
So now, I had made an intervention here yesterday because it's here I was pointing out that the Housing Act makes provision for a housing fund, but that is related to non-contributors of the NHT. NHT has a facility for contributors to get a grant for accessibility purposes. But this is particularly for persons with disabilities. So I gather that this would be applicable to a senior citizen who has a disability, right? So they could get the 500,000 grant to build a ramp to enter the building and to put in modified toilet facilities, etc. So that, when I looked at the NHT yesterday, the provision is there for specifically for persons with disability. But remember, this particular provision would be speaking to seniors with a disability.
Thank you, Senator Morris.
So you're defining it to seniors with disability?
Well, if we are going to make it in the recommendation in this legislation, it would have to be...
Hold on, Senator Morris. This would not be a legislative recommendation either.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Right.
I do know that the NHT allows you, well, you can access a home improvement loan. Was any consideration given to having consultations with them about a home improvement grant for senior citizens? That's something that could possibly be considered.
It's something that we can ask them to look at. It's not something for the law, I don't think.
Definitely it's not something for the legislation, but, you know, from time to time, the trust would review its policies. And if a well-reasoned recommendation is made, it may find some level of acceptance. What you don't want to do is have this, because it has to be refined. You don't want a holistic run on the trust for this kind of support. So there has to be some specifics aligned to it that the conversation can be had with the trust.
Thank you. Councilman Jimenez.
Right. In listening to the discussion, I recall there being mention in the recent Auditor General's report concerning the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation and the social housing programs that they have going on in that ministry. I understand that there are two primary social housing programs going on, and one of them includes a grant, and that grant is a part of a broader housing opportunity for low-income families and would assist persons who are in need of finances to assist them with suitable living conditions. So perhaps it could be recommended as a further policy consideration, but to the best of my knowledge, there is a program or project that is ongoing that may facilitate even older persons who are in need of retrofitting for their homes.
Okay, thank you. At the end of the day, though, this again is not a proposal for the proposed law. So we can note it for exploration as an initiative that could support the well-being and welfare of older persons, and let the powers that be flesh it out from there. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton.
Housing.
Madam,
Yes, Senator Morris.
Madam Chair, I am having a major challenge with right now, you see, and boy, I really in a little bind because I have a matter to deal with on the road, and in short order I will have to leave, but I don't want to leave because if I leave, then your committee, the committee or committee is going to be in problems in terms of a quorum.
Senator Morris, we're almost at the end of this. Can I ask that
You hold the bind a little.
can I ask?
No, man, I am going to stay till we finish this, you know.
Right.
It's just
And
that
then-
I'm signaling that.
What I would ask, in the interest of time and what I asked my colleagues yesterday, the report has been sent out this morning. If there are any corrections you have, if you could let us have those. But what we would do is just do some amendments in relation to matters discussed today. Now that is for all intents and purposes the special report that we are tabling. But the usual report with the matrix submissions and agreements of the committee will also be tabled, and we'll send those as well. So if my colleagues would again do a little homework for me, I know the challenge is on you, and take a look at those, then we can wrap it up. I will be working with the team through the evening to tomorrow to wrap it up, to get you to sign. Is that all right?
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair.
I thank you very much for that cooperation, Senator Morris. All right, let's get through this quickly.
Family and community integration, 37. Proposals have been administrative in nature and not legislative. See matrix.
So nothing to add to this document because they weren't legislative proposals at all. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Institutional capacity and governance. 38, establish an office of an older person's advocate with independence and reporting obligations to the Parliament, Commission of Parliament.
And this is the structure of the children's advocate.
39, provide for the older person's advocate to be able to monitor the implementation of legislation and policy, to receive, investigate, and respond to reports of abuse of older persons, to provide legal guidance and assistance to older persons, to represent or act on behalf of older persons in matters before the court, or to bring matters on behalf of older persons. The framework for an older person's advocate may be patterned on the structure of the children's advocate.
Yes, I think you have agreement.
40. Provide statutory grounding for the establishment of the National Senior Citizens Council for the administration and implementation of programs to enhance the well-being of older persons.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Here, want to make an intervention here because I do support the establishment of a statutory framework for the National Council for Senior Citizens. But does the statutory framework take into consideration the establishment of a board? Because, as I indicated yesterday, once you have
it would have to, Senator Morris. Let me just
okay,
put it in, because
because I never saw that there.
Yeah, if it's established in statute, then it would likely be established as a body corporate, which would require a board to monitor in the context of our administrative arrangements. So yes, and it wouldn't be an advisory board in that regard. It would now be a board of directors or a board of management.
Yeah. So the minister would establish that board.
Right, right.
Long-term care. Enact provisions for a long-term care act to provide a legal framework for the delivery of health and social services to older persons and at risk, for with loss of physical or mental capacity.
This was a recommendation, I believe, of Mona Aging and Wellness. And the question is, does this, and why I put it to the side is because I don't think the concept of a long-term care act fits into this legislation, and I don't think that's what they were recommending either. They were recommending, I believe, a standalone legislation to deal with long-term care. At the moment, that's a little bit out of the remit, I think, of this committee, but it is definitely something that we could recommend. That would have to be spearheaded, I expect, by the Ministry of Health.
But they were in support. They were in support of the establishment of this specific legislation here.
You mean the Ministry of Health?
No, they Mona.
Oh yeah. Yes, they proposed it. They proposed it.
Yeah.
And so I don't recall us having any objections. I think we all agreed in principle. I'm just suggesting that we can propose it for reference, for referral to the Ministry of Health, because it would sit with that ministry.
Okay.
41, include informal, family, and residential care within scope of legislation.
Repeat that?
Include informal, family, and residential care within scope of legislation.
I'm trying to remember what was the initiative there.
I'm not clear. I'm not clear as to that.
I am trying to recall what was the initiative there. Include. Who was that again? This was long-term care. Let's park that for a minute and go to the next one.
All right.
Let me look that back up.
42, set workforce standards for caregiver, training, certification, wages, etc.
Yeah, we've already agreed that.
All right. 43, on the wandering registry, create a registry for older persons prone to wandering.
I think this was a protective mechanism that you know these persons who are prone to wandering, so that the community can reach out to them.
And this again is not something that I think needs a legislative effort, because the National Council for Senior Citizens already has a registry for older persons. So what perhaps we ought to be asking them to do is to be capturing now, reaching out to determine which of those persons are prone to wandering, so that you could implement some sort of alert mechanism, an awareness mechanism in the community.
This way you
some
encourage
sort
the
of
family member
protocol.
to report
Yes.
it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Morris?
what I know happened in the Disabilities Act, and you have a registry for persons with disabilities, and that is stipulated as a feature of the law.
Yes.
Now, if you have a registry that requires the registry of persons who are senior citizens, then you could easily have a category, that allows for the identification of persons who are prone to wandering. So you would not need to establish a specific clause to deal with senior citizens who are prone to wandering, because you would already have the registry, and the registry would stipulate what are the categorizations for the registry.
Yes.
That's the end.
Very well.
As it relates to 41,
Yes,
to
so
include
41, let's go back to 41. 41 was part of the recommendation for Mona Aging and Wellness, and it was in reference to the Long-Term Care Act.
Yes.
So the comment was to include informal family and residential care within the scope of the legislation dealing with long-term care. And so we've already said that we would make the relevant notification so that we would refer the issue to the relevant ministry. Ooh, colleagues, that is our set of recommendations.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to leave you, but I must say to you, I'm proud of you. Thank you very much. We did an excellent job.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Senator Morris.
I will have more to say tomorrow.
All right, Senator Morris.
All right, but I
Senator
have
Morris,
to run.
before you run,
Bless
just
up
to be
yourself,
clear,
my friend.
All right, Floyd.
Senator Morris, just before you run, just to be clear, pages 33 to 39 of the report speak to the scope of the bill and outline that roadmap that we talked about. Okay? The beginning part of the report deal with the recommendations and the highlights, the background information from the submissions and the deliberations that we have had. So we will look at it again to make sure that the roadmap captures what we have agreed here. Make the amendments, and I have to, and I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on my parliamentary team, but Jamaica is listening to me. I need this document by end of day today so that we can go through it and get it tabled tomorrow in the Senate. This has been mammoth. Thank you.
So Madam Chair.
Yes.
Are you proposing that we have asked the president for a 1 hour intervention for
yes, and I don't think we'll need a 1 hour. I did it last week with the Regulations Committee, and what we actually did was we did an online 5-minute meeting to approve the report for tabling. So we can do that, but most of us will be here tomorrow in the Standing Orders Committee. I'm pretty sure the president will accommodate us. So we can take a few minutes. Do the deep dive tonight. Please feel free to read the document and send it back. Send it back, make sure I'm copied. I will be up working on it tonight. So that we have a final document and can complete this work. This committee began on December 29th.
Just send me a note, Madam Chair, with what you just said to me earlier in terms of the pages.
Okay.
So that I can, just send me probably a WhatsApp or something.
I will.
All right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morris. And I just want to thank all the members of the parliamentary team. I have to again, Senator Gale, highlight the Legislative Council Department that has been the fulcrum of the production of this work. I have to give props also to the Legal Reform Department, who even before this committee convened on December 29th, had 2 meetings with me and were already preparing the work that began the committee's deliberations. They were proactive. They did not wait for a call from me. And when I did meet with them, they were far advanced in getting us started. Thank you very much to the research team. Thank you to the interns, and thank you for all the tremendous work that has been done. Thank you to the National Council on Senior Citizens Chair, Dr. McCoy Davis. Thank you to Council for coming today. And thank you for your support. For all the ministries, departments, agencies who have participated in bringing submissions to the Mona Aging and Wellness, Ms. Sandra Latibaudier, and all the other presenters who took their time not just to write down what they wanted to put before us, but who also came and delivered oral presentations and helped us to understand, fielded our questions, and helped us to understand even better the perspective that we needed to be mindful of as we looked at the reforms and the issues that we needed to consider in making our proposals. Forgive me, but I must, just in the wrap-up phase, say something about this. Senator Morris is gone. I know we'll have another opportunity in the Senate tomorrow. But I want to thank him for tabling this motion. I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Gale, Senator Longmore, who isn't with us today, Senator Fraser Binns, who participated so robustly, Senators Gabriela Morris and Senator Charles Sinclair, who I know had some difficulties fitting into our timing sometimes. It has been truly a cooperative effort. It has been an absolute privilege to chair this committee and to lead and to support my colleagues. And I want to thank my committee clerk, who has been, without question, the most hardworking, the most efficient public servant I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And she has supported this committee robustly. She has kept me on my toes, and she has responded at every moment with the deliverables that we needed. So I want to just single her out, Mrs. Rosemary Douglas Beckford. She has been phenomenal. Thank you to the parliamentary staff. This work means a lot to our citizens, and it does not end here. The tabling of this report in the Senate tomorrow will have another process that should be engaged there, but it will also mean that if approved and accepted by the cabinet, it will have to go back to the line ministry for the preparation of drafting instructions and a bill to follow. I don't know whether I will be in a future parliament, but I will certainly look forward to seeing that come and come quickly. And so I ask the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and I'm going to say represented here by the National Council, to ensure that the work of this committee does not languish in the corridors of anybody's building or on the shelves of anybody's office, but that you continue to push to ensure that we have a comprehensive piece of legislation that will support the well-being, the welfare, the care, and the protection of all older persons in Jamaica, land we love. Thank you all for the work you have done. And thank you to my orderlies. I must recognize them, Ms. Smith and the youngsters who have supported all the documents. Every time I need a print of this document and I need this law and I need it now, they rush and they get it and they ensure that we are properly tooled. Thank you to them as well. On that note, and with the greatest amount of pride and gratitude, may I have a motion for adjournment?
I so move, Chair. We can now go look at the report.
And I second it.
I appeal to you, obey the road code, pay your ticket on time, and only go to court if the ticket is being contested. Close to 80% of matters coming to the parish courts are for traffic breaches. Let's work together to make our roads safe and ease the burden on our courts.
Attitude is something which productivity will require, and a good attitude. So these are conversations which are difficult. Because how do you instill a good attitude? It starts by the kinds of activities that you engage your children in at an early age. What are we teaching our children even in our own homes? How do they see us reacting to challenges? How do they hear us addressing issues? That's what's going to shape their attitude and their mindset.
Since 2016, 156,000 more Jamaicans are working. This is more than any other time in our history. Your government is caring for you.
Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde, comment allez-vous? Bienvenue et re-bienvenue. Hi, hello everybody, welcome back. J'espère que vous allez bien. J'espère que vous êtes super enthousiaste. Okay, I hope that you're, doing well, and I hope that you're super excited about this lesson. So we're looking at the verb faire, which means to do or to make. And it is indeed an irregular verb. So we're going to be breaking down the conjugation of this verb. We're going to be learning a song on how to conjugate it, which I found that some students really loved. And we'll be looking at some practice exercises so that we can practice actually conjugating this verb. So without any further ado, on y va, let's go. Bonjour, comment allez-vous? Comment ça va? Hello everyone and welcome back. How are you doing? Okay, je m'appelle Mademoiselle Taylor, comme vous le savez. My name is Miss Taylor, as you know. And aujourd'hui, nous allons voir le verbe faire. Today we're going to be looking at the verb faire. Donc, voyons les objectifs de la leçon. Let's look at the objectives of the lesson. Tout d'abord, nous allons apprendre à conjuguer le verbe faire. Firstly, we're going to be learning how to conjugate the verb faire. Deuxièmement, nous allons apprendre une chanson pour conjuguer le verbe faire. Secondly, we're going to be learning a song to conjugate the verb faire that will really help us with retaining the conjugation of this verb as it is an irregular verb. En troisième lieu, nous allons achever les exercices sur la conjugaison du verbe faire. We're going to be completing exercises on the conjugation of the verb faire. Et enfin, nous allons apprendre les expressions utiles avec le verbe faire. We're going to be learning some useful expressions that consist of the verb faire that you really should commit to memory to enhance your vocabulary and your speaking and writing ability. Donc, on y va. Let's go. Et j'espère que vous êtes aussi enthousiaste que moi. We are as excited as I am. Let's go. On y va. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So we know that when we're conjugating verbs, what you would have learned so far, when you're conjugating regular verbs, verbs that follow a conjugation pattern, normally what we would do is we drop the ending of the verb, that's the RE, and we'd get the stem. However, this verb being an irregular verb, we do not do that. You just have to learn the verb conjugation by heart, which is why songs help with this sort of thing. So we have here a very irregular verb, the verb faire, which means to do or to make. Okay, faire, to do or to make, irregular. So let's look at how we conjugate this verb. So there's no dropping of the RE, the ending, and getting any stem. We're not doing it like that. That's going to cause utter confusion. Let us just learn the verb by heart. So faire is the verb. And we get je fais, tu fais, tu fais, il, elle, on fait, il, elle, on fait, nous faisons, vous faites, and ils, elles font, ils, elles font, ils, elles font. So je fais, tu fais, ils, elles, on fait, ils, elles, on fait, nous faisons, vous faites, ils, elles font. Okay, so now that we know how to conjugate the verb, let us learn a little song to help us to master the conjugation of this verb and to know it by heart. So let's go. So just a reminder, je fais, tu fais, il et l'on fait, nous faisons, vous faites, ils, elles font. Okay, and just a reminder, je fais means I do or I make or I am doing or I am making. As any verb conjugated in the present tense of the indicative, any verb conjugated in the present tense is also present continuous. So je fais means I do or I make. It also means I am doing or I am making. Tu fais, you do or you make, or you do or you are making. Il et l'on fait, he, she, one does or makes. He, she, one is doing or is making. Nous faisons, we do or we make. Nous faisons, we are doing or we are making. Vous faites, you do or you make. You are doing or you are making. And ils, elles font, they do or they make. They are doing or they are making. So we see we have both the present and the present continuous represented here. Okay, so the song is to the tune of Excess Love, right? The original version, not the remix version. And let us look at what that sounds like. Okay guys, do not hate, just appreciate. Okay, so let us get right into the song, and it goes like this. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer, F-A-I-T, nous faisons, et vous faites, F-A-I-T-E-S, ils, elles font, F-O-N-T, ils, elles font, F-O-N-T. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. Nous faisons, vous faites, ils, elles font. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. Nous faisons, vous faites, ils, elles font. All right, so let's do it one more time, and I'm gonna slow it down on the beat, okay? So let's go après toi. 1, 2, 3. Je fais, tu fais. Il est l'enfer. F-A-I-T. Nous faisons. Et vous faites. F-A-I-T-E-S. Ils, elles font. F-O-N-T. Don't have to do that. Ils, elles font. F-O-N-T. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. Nous faisons, vous faites, ils, elles font. Let's sing it together again. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. Nous faisons, vous faites, ils, elles font. Alright, so that's it. I hope you're able to catch the beats. And just remember, je and tu, it's F-A-I-S. Il est lent, F-A-I-T. Nous faisons, F-A-I-S-O-N-S. Vous faites, F-A-I-T-E-S, which we spelled out because it's so different from how you conjugate the verb normally, okay? So it's more natural for you to remember that nous is faisons, but then when you get to vous, you feel like you'd want to say vous faisiez, but it's not right. That's why we spell out vous faites, F-A-I-T-E-S. Ils, elles font, F-O-N-T. Alright, so I hope this helps you greatly. Alright, let's look at what this produced on class. On y va. Alright, listen carefully. Yes. Okay. Alright, starting with the lyrics on the bar. Let's go. Je fais, tu fais. Il est long. Il est lancé. F-A-I-T. Nous faisons. Okay. Et vous faites. Wait for it, je fais. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. Nous faisons, vous faites, elles font. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. Nous faisons, vous faites, elles font. Alright, so I hope we all sang to our heart's content. I hope that we can now sing our way to success as we conjugate the verb pair in the blank space. We're also identifying the pronoun, which is a very important step. It is necessary that we're able to identify the pronoun that can substitute for the subject of a sentence, as that will help us in correctly conjugating the verb. It will help us going forward as well. So that's all we're going to be doing here. Feel free to pause the video at any time and just, try to do it yourself. Don't wait for the answers. You pause it, you figure it out yourself, and then verify if you got it correct or not. Alright, so we're identifying the pronoun and we're also conjugating the verb pair in the blank spaces. So the first one, ma mère blanque le ménage. The verb is faire that we're conjugating in the blank space. Which pronoun can substitute for ma mère? Let's go. Un, deux. Ça y est, let's go. It is elle. Okay, my mother, feminine singular. If you said elle, that is indeed correct. That is a pronoun that can substitute for ma mère. So once we've identified that elle is a pronoun, we sing a little song. Je fais, tu fais, il est l'enfer. F-A-I-T, and we got it. F-A-I-T. Ma mère fait le ménage. What does that mean? My mother does the housework. She does the chores, basically. We're going to be looking also at some expressions that you can use. Well, expressions that employ the verb faire. Faire? What? Expressions that employ the verb faire. Okay? So we're going to be looking at those as well. It would be good for you to make a note of them, as they will come in handy when you're looking at the activities you can do while traveling or things that you do for hobbies. It will come in handy for situation responses. Okay? Enough of that. Let's get right back into the lesson. Numéro 2. Les étudiants. Les étudiants. Which pronoun can substitute for les étudiants? Tout à fait, c'est il. It is masculine plural. The male students or the students, simply put. The students, il, and il, enfant. So we know it spells F-O-N-T. So les étudiants font la correction de leurs devoirs. The students are doing the correction of their homework. Numéro 3, le boulanger. Le boulanger. You know that is the baker. And it's masculine singular. We see the big old L-E-le in front of it. So we know that the pronoun that can substitute for le boulanger is very much so. It is il. I-L. Il. Okay. Le boulanger. F-A-I-T. Il fait le pain. Le boulanger fait le pain. F-A-I-T. Le pain. The boulanger makes bread. Et numéro 4, le pâtissier et moi. Le pâtissier et moi. What is that? Once you see et moi, we know that the substituting pronoun is tout à fait. You are correct if you said it. It is indeed nous. Le pâtissier et moi. Nous. Faisons. Faisons. Le pâtissier et moi faisons des desserts comme des gâteaux. The pastry chef and I make desserts like cakes. Let's continue. Faire le ménage. That is the expression. Faire le ménage. And that expression means to do the housework. To do housework. To do chores. Okay? So ma mère fait le ménage. My mother does the housework. My mother does chores. So you have little expressions like these. This is just the structure that is used in French, right? And just know the structure. So you're just going to conjugate the verb faire and then add le ménage, and that's what you're doing for each one that you're going to encounter. Okay? So let's continue on, Eva. Alright? Hope your fingers are quick. You're getting 3 seconds to look at these sentences very quickly. We're identifying the pronoun and we're conjugating the verb. Après 3, 1, 2, 3. Que blank les pédiatres? What do pediatricians do? What is the pronoun? Il. Indeed, this is il. We notice we have changed the order of the sentence. It's not subject and then verb. We have the verb first and then we have the pronoun. Let's look at what that means. Que font les pédiatres? Okay, so we have the verb first and then we have the pronoun, well, the pronoun slash the subject because we're asking a question. Alright, what do pediatricians do basically? Que font les pédiatres? Okay, les pédiatres, ils, verb, font. Numéro 2, Sandra et vous, which pronoun would it be? This is indeed vous, and we know it's F-A-I-T-E-S. Vous Sandra et vous faites du shopping ce week-end. Je fais les courses avec ma maman. We're going to look at what these expressions mean. Numéro 4, papa et toi, which pronoun can substitute for papa et toi? That is indeed correct. It is vous. And that would be faites, F-A-I-T-E-S. Papa et vous faites la vaisselle ce soir. So let's look at what these expressions mean. To find the pédiatre means what the pediatricians do. Number 2, faire du shopping. Faire du shopping, it's an informal expression and it means to go shopping for fun. Faire du shopping, to go shopping for fun. Okay, maybe it's just like impulse spending. You didn't necessarily plan it, it's just, because you have the cash to do so. Numéro 3, faire les courses. Faire les courses. Faire les courses. That is to go grocery shopping. To go grocery shopping. Numéro 4, faire la vaisselle. Faire la vaisselle. Faire la vaisselle. That means to do the dishes. Okay? So these are very handy expressions that it will do you well to retain so that you can use them in the future. Alright? Let's continue. Keep your fingers quick, your brain sharp. Et on y va. Okay. Marie et moi. Which pronoun is it? Marie et moi. Which pronoun? It is indeed nous. Nous. Once you see et moi, you know the pronoun is nous. Okay? Faisons, F-A-I-S-O-N-S. Se marier et moi faisons des économies ensemble. Alright, numéro 2. Les enfants blanquent le lit chaque matin. Which pronoun can substitute for les enfants? It would indeed be il. And once you have il, enfant, F-O-N-T, right? Les enfants font le lit chaque matin. Numéro 3. Est-ce que tu, the pronoun is given, est-ce que tu fais du sport? Est-ce que tu fais du sport? Right? Numéro 4. Thierry blank une promenade le soir. Thierry, yes, that is a male. Is one male, is one person. So that means that we can substitute with the pronoun il. Fait une promenade le soir. So Thierry fait une promenade le soir. Let's look at the different expressions we can get from this activity. We have faire des économies, faire des économies, which means to save up, when let's say you want to go on that mother languages trip to France, to Martinique, to Guadeloupe. Okay, you're going to faire des économies, you're going to save up to achieve your goal. Les enfants font le lit. So faire le lit means to make the bed. Faire le lit, to make the bed. You should all do that every morning. Numéro 3. Faire du sport, as you can imagine. Faire du sport means to do sports, to play sports. Numéro 4. Faire une promenade. That means to go for a walk. To take a walk. Okay? Let's continue. Getting to nearly the end of it. Mes cousines, please pay close attention to cousine, not cousin without the E, but cousine with the E. And so based on my emphasis that it is indeed a feminine subject. Mes cousines, my female cousins. So the pronoun will be elle. Alright? Mes cousines blanquent la cuisine à la maison. Font. Elles font la cuisine à la maison. We're going to be looking at the vocabulary again. Numéro 2. La jardinière blanque du jardinage. La jardinière. Yes, this is a profession and it is in its feminine form. So the pronoun will be elle. Having established that the pronoun is elle, we know how to sing the song, so we conjugate the verb accordingly. Je fais, tu fais, il est long. Fait, F-A-I-T, du jardinage. We're going to look at what that means shortly. Granted, you should be able to deduce meaning. Okay, numéro 3, kind of tricky. Qui blanc la lessive chez toi? Qui blanc la lessive chez toi? Chez toi. La lessive. Faire la lessive means to do the laundry. Faire la lessive means to do the laundry. Okay? So it's asking who does the laundry at your house? Chez toi. Toi means I know you familiarly, I know you, you know, not formal. It's not a formal reference, it's an informal or familiar reference. So I'm using toi means I'm speaking to somebody that I know. So I'm asking qui blanc la lessive chez toi? Who does the laundry at your house? Huh? So when you know that qui is who or whom, in this case who does the laundry? Does your mother do the laundry? Does your father do the laundry? Does your uncle, your sister, your brother? Who does the laundry? Which person does the laundry? Who does it? So the pronoun, though it's not really there, would be il or elle. Okay? He. Il or elle. So you conjugate the verb by using fait, F-A-I-T. Qui fait la lessive chez toi? Who does the laundry at your house? Qui fait la lessive chez toi? Numéro 4. Les touristes blancs de la plongée sous-marine. Les touristes blancs de la plongée sous-marine. Numéro 2. Faire du jardinage. Faire du jardinage. If the jardinière is in the process of faire du jardinage, right? If the gardener is doing, yes, it means to do the gardening. Faire du jardinage, to do gardening. Faire la lessive, like I said, means to do the laundry. And faire de la plongée sous-marine, faire de la plongée sous-marine, faire de la plongée sous-marine is to go scuba diving. Ok, très bien fait. Bravo à tous et à toutes. Good job, guys. À nous, hein? To us. Très bien. Bravo. Encore.